Worry is the thief that steals your future while you're too distracted protecting a past that's already gone. Right now, you're standing at the edge of everything you want, but you can't see it because you're too busy staring at shadows. You're fighting battles that exist only in your imagination. You're running from dangers that haven't even looked your way. You're building fortresses against threats that may never come, and in the process, you're locking yourself inside while opportunity knocks outside. 2026 is already here, already moving, already creating openings for those brave enough to step through them. But you're paralyzed, frozen by the weight of what-ifs that multiply like weeds in an untended garden. The ancient Stoics understood something we've forgotten in our age of constant anxiety. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Think about water for a moment. When you clench your fist around it, it escapes through your fingers. But when you open your palm, it rests there, perfectly still, perfectly yours. Your life works the same way. The tighter you grip, the faster it slips away. The more you worry, the more you block the natural flow of solutions, opportunities and breakthroughs that are trying to reach you. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending problems don't exist. This is about something deeper, something the ancient philosophers practiced daily, the art of distinguishing between what deserves your energy and what deserves your release. Because here's the truth they knew, and you need to remember. Most of what you worry about exists only in the prison of your mind, and you're both the prisoner and the one holding the key. 2026 isn't just another year. It's a blank canvas waiting for your first bold stroke. But worry keeps your brush hovering, trembling, afraid to make a mark. Time doesn't pause for your anxiety. It moves forward with or without you, and every moment you spend frozen in fear is a moment you could have spent building something beautiful. The universe doesn't reward your worry with safety. It rewards your courage with possibility. It responds to movement, not paralysis, to presence, not projection, to faith, not fretting. And right now, while you're reading these words, it's offering you a choice. Stay trapped in the loop of anxiety or break free into the flow of life. The philosophy we're exploring today isn't ancient because it's old. It's ancient because it's eternal. Generation after generation discovered the same truth, that peace isn't found in controlling every outcome, but in trusting the process. That success isn't about eliminating uncertainty, but about moving forward despite it. That the good life isn't waiting on the other side of your worries, it's happening right now, obscured only by the fog of your fear. If you're ready to let go of what's weighing you down, hype the video and type this in the comments: I release control. Number 1. Distinguish between concern and worry. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." This simple statement contains the entire blueprint for a worry-free existence, but most people miss the distinction he's making. Concern is productive, worry is parasitic. Concern says, "There's a challenge ahead, let me prepare." Worry says, "There's a challenge ahead, let me panic." Concern mobilizes you. Worry paralyzes you. Concern lives in the present and plans for the future. Worry lives in the future and destroys the present. Learning to tell the difference isn't just helpful, it's the foundation of everything that's about to work out for you in 2026. When you're concerned about your finances, you create a budget. You look for additional income streams. You educate yourself about money. You take action. When you worry about your finances, you lie awake at 3 in the morning calculating disaster scenarios. You avoid checking your bank account. You feel sick every time a bill arrives. You take no action, or worse, you take fearful action that makes things worse. The ancient philosophers weren't telling you to stop caring. They were teaching you to care effectively. There's a world of difference between caring about your health and worrying yourself sick about every symptom, between caring about your relationships and obsessing over every text message delay, between caring about your career and catastrophizing every setback into permanent failure. Here's what happens when you operate from concern instead of worry. You actually solve problems. Novel concept, right? But think about it. How many problems have you actually solved while worrying? How many situations improved because you spent hours imagining worst-case scenarios? The answer is 0. Worry has never once written your resume, healed your relationship, improved your health, or increased your bank account. It's the most useless expenditure of human energy ever invented. But concern gets things done. Concern is your friend showing up with solutions. Worry is your enemy showing up with suffering. In 2026, you're going to practice this distinction every single day. When anxiety rises, you're going to pause and ask, is this concern prompting me toward action, or is this worry keeping me in reaction? If it's concern, you act. If it's worry, you release it. The Stoics had a practice they called the dichotomy of control. They divided everything into 2 categories: things within your control and things outside your control. Your effort, within your control. The outcome, outside your control. Your preparation, within your control. Other people's responses, outside your control. Your attitude, within your control. The economy, the weather, the past, all outside your control. What changes when you truly internalize this? Everything. You stop wasting energy on the immovable and invest it in the changeable. You stop arguing with reality and start working with it. You stop being a victim of circumstance and start being an architect of response. This isn't resignation, this is revolution. Because when you focus exclusively on what you can control, you discover you have far more power than you ever imagined. Think about your biggest worry right now. Hold it in your mind. Now ask yourself, what part of this is actually within my control? Maybe it's 5% of the situation. Maybe it's 50%. But I guarantee you've been spending 100% of your energy on it, including the parts you can't influence. What if you took all that energy you're wasting on the uncontrollable and poured it into the controllable instead? What if you became obsessed with your response instead of the situation? That's not just a what if. That's your assignment for 2026. Every time you catch yourself worrying, you're going to extract the concern, the actionable piece, and you're going to release the rest. You're going to become ruthless about this distinction. Because here's what the ancient philosophers knew and what you're about to experience. The moment you stop worrying about what you can't control, what you can control starts working out in ways that seem almost magical. It's not magic, it's focus. It's energy directed instead of scattered. It's the natural result of showing up fully in the only moment that actually exists. This one, not the future you're worried about. Not the past you're regretting. This moment, right here, where all your power lives. Let me see who's committed to focusing on what actually matters. Drop this below. I control my response. Number 2, accept that uncertainty is the only certainty. Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher, observed something that most people spend their entire lives fighting against. Life is a series of natural and spontaneous changes. Don't resist them. That only creates sorrow. Let reality be reality. Let things flow naturally forward in whatever way they like. This isn't passivity. This is the highest form of intelligence, recognizing that your resistance to uncertainty costs you more than the uncertainty itself ever could. You want guarantees. You want to know how everything will turn out before you take the first step. You want the entire staircase illuminated before you move your foot. But that's not how life works, and it's never been how life works. The only people who have certainty are the people who've stopped living, stopped growing, stopped evolving. Everyone else? We're all walking into fog, and the ones who thrive are the ones who've made peace with not seeing the entire path. Here's what nobody tells you about uncertainty. It's neutral. It's not good or bad. It's not threatening or promising. It just is. But your relationship with it, that determines everything. When you treat uncertainty as an enemy, every unknown becomes a source of anxiety. When you treat uncertainty as a companion, every unknown becomes a source of possibility. Same uncertainty, completely different experience, and the only thing that changed was your perspective. In 2026, everything you want is hiding in uncertainty. That career breakthrough, it's uncertain. That relationship healing, uncertain. That creative project succeeding, uncertain. That financial turnaround, uncertain. And you can either let that uncertainty stop you, or you can let it fuel you. Because here's the secret the ancient philosophers discovered. Uncertainty means anything is possible, including the miracle you've been praying for. Think about every major positive change in your life, your best friendships, your proudest accomplishments, your most beautiful memories. Did any of them come with guarantees? Did you know for certain they would work out before they happened? Of course not. You stepped into uncertainty, and uncertainty gave you gifts you never could have planned. But somewhere along the way, you forgot this. You started believing that uncertainty was your enemy when it's actually been your greatest ally all along. The Buddhists have a concept called beginner's mind, approaching each moment fresh, without the burden of needing to know what comes next. When you have beginner's mind, you're curious instead of anxious. You're open instead of closed. You're exploring instead of controlling. And paradoxically, when you stop needing to control outcomes, outcomes start aligning in your favor. Not because you manipulated them, but because you got out of their way. Your worry about the future is actually arrogance in disguise. Stay with me here. When you worry, you're essentially saying, I know this is going to turn out badly. But how do you know? What evidence do you have about something that hasn't happened yet? You're predicting the future based on the past, projecting old pain onto new possibilities, and calling it realism when it's actually just fear wearing a logical mask. What if you approached 2026 with a different assumption? Not blind optimism, but genuine openness. What if instead of asking, what if this goes wrong, you asked, what if this goes right? What if instead of bracing for impact, you leaned into potential? What if you trusted that even if things don't go according to your plan, they might go according to a better plan you haven't imagined yet? The ancient Stoics practiced something called amor fati, which means love of fate, not tolerance of fate, not acceptance of fate, love of it. They trained themselves to embrace whatever happened, to see every twist and turn as exactly what needed to happen. This doesn't mean you don't have preferences. It means you don't make your peace conditional on getting those preferences met. Here's your practice for this principle. Every time you feel the grip of uncertainty tightening around your chest, you're going to consciously relax into it. You're going to say, I don't know how this will turn out, and that's okay. I don't need to know. I just need to take the next right step. And then you're going to take that step. Not the 20th step, not the final step, just the next one. Watch what happens when you do this consistently. The uncertainty doesn't disappear, but your suffering around it does. You start moving forward even when you can't see the destination. You start building even when you don't have the blueprint. You start living even when you don't have guarantees. And life, in its infinite wisdom, starts responding to your courage instead of your caution. If you're brave enough to step into the unknown, Declare it right now. I embrace uncertainty. Number 3. Stop rehearsing disaster. Seneca wrote something that might sting a little. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Read that again. Most of your suffering isn't happening to you. You're doing it to yourself. You're creating elaborate disaster scenarios in your mind and then emotionally living through them as if they're real. You're experiencing trauma from events that haven't occurred and may never occur. You're grieving losses that haven't happened. You're fighting battles that exist nowhere except in your thoughts. This is what worry actually is. A horror movie you write, direct, star in, and watch on repeat. And here's the cruelest part. You think you're preparing yourself. You think by imagining the worst, you're somehow protecting yourself from it. But you're not. You're just torturing yourself in advance and guaranteeing that even if the disaster never comes, you've already lived through the pain of it. How much of what you worried about last year actually happened? Be honest. Maybe 10%, 20%. And of that small percentage that did happen, did your worry prevent it? Did your anxiety make it easier to handle? Or did you end up dealing with it in the moment anyway, meaning you just suffered twice, once in anticipation and once in reality? In 2026, you're going to break this pattern. Not because worry is morally wrong, but because it's practically useless and emotionally devastating. Every minute you spend rehearsing disaster is a minute you could spend preparing for success. Every hour you invest in worst-case scenarios is an hour you could invest in best-case preparations. The energy is the same. The choice of where to direct it is yours. The ancient philosophers weren't naive. They knew bad things happen. Epictetus was a slave who became crippled. Marcus Aurelius ruled during a plague that killed millions. Seneca was forced to commit suicide by a tyrant. They understood suffering intimately, but they also understood something you need to learn, that suffering is inevitable, but the suffering you add to suffering through worry is optional. There's a difference between preparation and disaster rehearsal. Preparation says, I'll save money in case of emergency. Disaster rehearsal says, I'll lose my job, then my house, then I'll end up alone and broken. Preparation is practical. Disaster rehearsal is self-harm. Preparation gives you options. Disaster rehearsal gives you panic attacks. Here's what you're going to practice instead. Realistic optimism. You acknowledge that challenges exist without assuming you can't handle them. You prepare for difficulties without predicting devastation. You stay grounded in reality without drowning in negativity. You accept that bad things might happen while refusing to live as if they already have. The Stoics had an exercise called premeditatio malorum, which sounds like it contradicts everything I just said, but stay with me. They would briefly visualize potential challenges, not to torture themselves, but to remind themselves they could handle it. The key word is briefly. They'd spend maybe 5 minutes considering a difficulty, acknowledge their capability to face it, and then return to the present moment. They didn't loop the disaster film for hours. They didn't create sequels and prequels. They glanced at it and moved on. That's radically different from what you've been doing. You've been binge-watching catastrophe. You've been creating extended director's cuts of doom. You've been so committed to the disaster narrative that you've missed the actual story unfolding around you, the one where you're capable, resilient, and surrounded by possibilities. What changes when you stop rehearsing disaster? Everything. Your nervous system calms down. Your creativity returns. Your energy comes back. Your relationships improve because you're actually present instead of mentally practicing breakup speeches. Your work improves because you're focused on doing it well instead of imagining it failing. Your whole life improves because you're finally living it instead of dreading it. Every time you catch yourself writing the disaster script, you're going to stop mid-sentence. You're going to recognize what you're doing, and you're going to choose differently. You're going to redirect that creative energy toward solutions, toward gratitude, toward the present moment, toward anything except the self-created suffering you've been addicted to. Show me you're done torturing yourself with worry. Comment this: I choose peace. Number 4, trust the timing of your life. Rumi, the 13th century Persian poet and philosopher, understood something that your impatience keeps obscuring. Don't grieve. Anything you lose comes round in another form. This isn't mystical nonsense. This is the recognition that life operates on a timeline you can't see, orchestrating connections and opportunities in ways your limited perspective can't comprehend. What looks like a delay is often protection. What feels like rejection is often redirection. What seems like failure is often preparation. You're convinced you're behind some invisible schedule that says you should have achieved certain things by certain ages, behind your peers who seem to have it all figured out, behind the timeline you created when you were younger and didn't understand how life actually works. And this belief that you're behind is creating more anxiety than any actual problem in your life. You're not late. You're not missing out. You're exactly where you need to be, learning exactly what you need to learn. Think about the best things that ever happened to you, the ones you're most grateful for now. How many of them happened on your timeline? How many of them came when you demanded they come? Probably none. They came when they came. And looking back, you can see why the timing was perfect, even though it felt torturous while you were waiting. That relationship that didn't work out cleared the path for the one that did. That job you didn't get prevented you from being in the wrong place. That delay gave you skills you didn't know you'd need. In 2026, you're going to practice something the ancient philosophers called patient urgency. You're going to work with intensity while trusting the process. You're going to give your absolute best effort while releasing attachment to when results appear. You're going to plant seeds with dedication while understanding that you don't control the seasons. You're going to be both committed and calm, both ambitious and accepting. The Tao Te Ching teaches that nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. Look at a tree. Does it stress about growing? Does it worry that it's not tall enough fast enough? Does it compare itself to other trees? No. It grows at its own pace, in its own time, responding to conditions it can't control, and eventually it becomes exactly what it was meant to be. You're no different. You're unfolding. The only thing your worry does is make the unfolding painful. Your impatience is rooted in fear. Fear that if it doesn't happen now, it won't happen at all. Fear that you're running out of time. Fear that everyone else is ahead and you're falling behind. But these fears are lies. Time isn't running out, it's accumulating. Every experience, every setback, every detour is adding to who you're becoming. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is lost. Everything is preparing you for what's coming. Here's what you need to understand about divine timing, or if you prefer secular language, optimal timing. Things come together when all the necessary elements align. Not just your readiness, but circumstances, other people's journeys, market conditions, opportunities, resources. You might be ready before all the other pieces are in place. That doesn't mean you're being punished. It means you get to use that time to become even more ready, to develop even more capacity for what's coming. The ancient Stoics practiced a concept called sympathia, the interconnectedness of all things. They understood that your timeline is woven into a larger tapestry you can't see. What seems like your isolated delay might be coordinating with someone else's journey who will become crucial to your success. What feels like your personal setback might be positioning you for an opportunity that doesn't exist yet but will appear at exactly the right moment. When you stop fighting the timing and start trusting it, something magical happens. the anxiety drains away. Not because your circumstances change, but because your relationship with your circumstances changes. You're no longer at war with reality. You're dancing with it. You're no longer demanding that life conform to your schedule. You're discovering the freedom in flowing with life's schedule. This doesn't mean you become passive. Ancient wisdom never advocates passivity. You still set goals. You still take action. You still move forward. But you do it without the desperate energy of someone who believes they're running out of time. You do it with the confident energy of someone who knows that effort is required, but timing is provided. You work hard and let go hard. You push and you trust. Here's your practice. Every time you catch yourself thinking, "I should be further along," you're going to replace it with, "I'm exactly where I need to be, learning what I need to learn." Every time anxiety about timing rises, you're going to take a breath and remind yourself that you can't see the whole picture. Every time comparison makes you feel behind, you're going to remember that you're running your own race on your own track toward your own finish line. Watch what happens when you truly trust timing. Doors open that were previously invisible. Opportunities appear that weren't there yesterday. People show up who change everything, and you realize that all those delays you resented were actually alignments you didn't understand. All those closed doors were protecting you from wrong rooms. All that waiting was maturation, not punishment. If you're finally ready to stop rushing and start trusting, type this: "I trust my timing." Number 5. Release the need for external validation. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others." Here was a man who could command armies, who held absolute power, and he was reminding himself of what you need to remember, that seeking approval from others is the fastest way to lose yourself. You're exhausted because you're trying to be everyone's version of successful instead of your own. You're anxious because you're managing 1,000 imaginary audiences in your head, wondering what they think, what they expect, whether they approve. You're stuck because you've outsourced your worth to people who don't even know your story. And as long as external validation is your measure of success, you'll never have enough of it. The goalpost will keep moving. The audience will keep changing. The approval will keep feeling temporary. In 2026, everything starts working out when you finally understand this. Other people's opinions of you are none of your business. That's not callousness. That's freedom. Because their opinions are based on their lens, their wounds, their limitations, their projections. Someone who's never taken a risk will judge your courage as recklessness. Someone who's never pursued their dreams will call your ambition foolishness. Someone who's settled will criticize your refusal to settle. Their opinion says everything about them and nothing about you. The ancient cynics, particularly Diogenes, took this to an extreme that might make you uncomfortable, but contains profound truth. Diogenes lived in a barrel, owned nothing, and when Alexander the Great himself came to offer him anything he wanted, Diogenes told him to step aside because he was blocking the sunlight. He had zero concern for what anyone thought. Now you don't need to live in a barrel, but you do need to find that same internal compass that doesn't spin based on external winds. Here's what seeking validation costs you: your authenticity. Every time you adjust yourself to fit someone else's expectations, you abandon a piece of who you really are. Every time you silence your truth to avoid judgment, you betray yourself. Every time you choose approval over integrity, you trade permanent peace for temporary comfort. And the tragedy is, even after all that contortion, you still won't get everyone's approval because it's impossible. You'll just lose yourself in the process. The Buddhist concept of mudita teaches us to find joy in our own progress. without needing applause, to celebrate your own growth without requiring witnesses, to acknowledge your own worth without external confirmation. This is the practice of being your own validator, your own cheerleader, your own measure of success, not in an arrogant way, but in a grounded, self-aware way. Think about the things you're most proud of in your life, the moments of real growth, the times you overcame something difficult, the instances where you showed up as your best self. Did those moments lose their value because nobody posted about them? Because they didn't get likes or recognition? Of course not. Their value was intrinsic. It existed whether anyone else acknowledged it or not. That's the energy you need to bring to everything you do in 2026. When you stop performing for approval, you start performing from purpose. When you stop seeking validation, you start seeking truth. When you stop managing everyone's perception, you start living your actual life. And ironically, the less you care about what people think, the more magnetic you become. Because authenticity is rare, because confidence that doesn't need constant reinforcement is attractive, because people who know who they are inspire people who are still searching. Here's what you're going to practice. Before you post, before you speak, before you make a decision, you're going to ask yourself one question. Am I doing this because it's true to me, or because I want approval? If the honest answer is approval, you're going to pause. That doesn't mean you never consider others. It means you don't betray yourself for applause. You're also going to practice being your own source of validation. When you do something well, you're going to acknowledge it internally. I handled that with grace. I showed up despite fear. I kept my word to myself. You're going to become the voice that cheers for you, that recognizes your progress, that validates your effort, not in a narcissistic way, but in a healthy, self-supportive way. The ancient philosophers knew that the only sustainable source of confidence is internal. Everything external is temporary, conditional, fickle. But when you know who you are, when you trust your own judgment, when you validate your own worth, nobody can take that from you. Markets can crash, relationships can end, jobs can disappear, but your relationship with yourself, that's the foundation that holds through every storm. Let the world know you're done seeking approval. Drop this affirmation, I validate myself. Number 6, transform obstacles into opportunities. Marcus Aurelius, writing during a plague that devastated his empire, offered this perspective that will change how you see every challenge in 2026. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This isn't philosophical poetry meant to sound nice. This is a practical framework for turning every obstacle into the exact fuel you need for your breakthrough. Right now, you're looking at the obstacles in your path as evidence that you're on the wrong path. You see the resistance and assume it means stop. You encounter difficulty and interpret it as a sign that this isn't meant for you. But what if you have it completely backwards? What if the obstacle isn't blocking your path but actually creating it? What if the very thing you think is stopping you is actually building you? Every single person you admire, every success story you respect, every achievement you aspire to has obstacles at its core. Not despite the obstacles, but because of them. The obstacle is what forged the strength. The difficulty is what developed the skill. The resistance is what built the resilience. You want the outcome without the obstacle, but that's like wanting the sculpture without the chisel. The obstacle is the chisel shaping you into who you need to become. In 2026, you're going to practice what the Stoics called the obstacle is the way. When something blocks you, instead of seeing it as a problem, you're going to ask, what is this teaching me? What strength is this building? What skill is this forcing me to develop? How is this redirecting me towards something better? not in a fake positive way, but in a genuinely curious way. The Chinese philosophy embedded in the I Ching teaches that crisis and opportunity are intertwined. The same symbol represents both danger and possibility. It's not that one becomes the other. It's that they exist simultaneously. Every obstacle contains both, the danger of staying stuck and the possibility of breaking through. Which one manifests depends entirely on how you engage with it. Think about your biggest obstacle right now, the one that's been keeping you up at night, draining your energy, making you question everything. What if that specific obstacle is exactly what you need to develop the exact quality required for your next level? What if the financial pressure is teaching you resourcefulness you'll need as an entrepreneur? What if the relationship challenge is teaching you boundaries you'll need for healthy love? What if the career setback is teaching you resilience you'll need for real success? The ancient Spartans had a practice that seems harsh but contains profound wisdom. They would expose their children to controlled adversity specifically to build strength, not cruelty for its sake, but difficulty for development. They understood that protection from all obstacles creates weakness, while engagement with appropriate obstacles creates capability. You don't need to seek suffering, but you do need to stop running from the struggles that find you. Here's what happens when you shift your relationship with obstacles. They lose their power to paralyze you, not because they disappear, but because you stop seeing them as enemies. They become puzzles to solve instead of walls to crumble against. They become training grounds instead of battlefields. They become plot twists instead of dead ends. Same obstacles, completely different experience. The practice of turning obstacles upside down is simple, but not easy. When something goes wrong, you immediately ask, how can I use this? What advantage is hidden here? What would someone more creative than me do with this limitation? You become an alchemist, transforming lead into gold, transmuting problems into possibilities. History is filled with examples of this principle in action. The person who couldn't get funding started small and built organically, creating a more sustainable business than if money had come easy. The athlete who got injured studied the game from a different angle and became a better strategist. The artist who couldn't afford traditional materials invented a new medium. The obstacle didn't just refine the path, it revealed the path. You're going to practice obstacle reframing every single day in 2026. Traffic isn't wasting your time, it's giving you time to think. Rejection isn't proving you're not good enough, it's protecting you from wrong fit. Failure isn't evidence of inability, it's feedback for improvement. Delay isn't denying you, it's developing you. You're going to get so good at this reframe that obstacles actually start to excite you because you know they're carrying gifts in disguise. The Taoist story of the farmer illustrates this perfectly. His horse runs away and the neighbors say, "Such bad luck." He replies, "Maybe." The horse returns with wild horses and the neighbors say, "Such good luck." He replies, "Maybe." His son breaks his leg training the horses. "Bad luck," he says, "maybe." Then war breaks out and his son is spared because of the injury. "Good luck," he says, "maybe." The farmer understood that you can't judge whether something is good or bad in the moment because you can't see where it leads. That's your new relationship with obstacles. You don't immediately catastrophize. You don't immediately celebrate. You stay present. You stay curious. You ask what you can learn, how you can grow, where this might lead. You trust that even when you can't see the purpose, there is one. You work with what is instead of against it. Number 7. Practice presence over projection. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk, taught something that directly contradicts how you've been living. The present moment is the only moment available to us, and it is the door to all moments. You've been standing at that door, staring through the keyhole at imagined futures, completely missing the fact that the door is already open and the life you want is happening right now, obscured only by your absence from it. You're physically here but mentally everywhere else. In conversations, you're rehearsing what you'll say next instead of listening. At work, you're worried about future projects instead of excelling at current tasks. With loved ones, you're on your phone checking updates instead of making memories. During meals, you're planning tomorrow instead of tasting today. You're so busy living in your head that you're missing your actual life. In 2026, everything changes when you finally come home to the present moment. Not occasionally, not when things are calm, consistently. Because here's what the ancient contemplatives discovered through thousands of hours of practice. The present moment is the only place where peace exists. It's the only place where joy exists. It's the only place where power exists. Past is memory, future is imagination. This moment, this is real. This is where your life is actually happening. The Stoics understood that worry about the future steals the present. Seneca wrote extensively about how we waste our lives by never actually being in them. We postpone living, thinking we'll start really living when conditions are perfect, when we've achieved enough, when we're finally safe. But that moment never comes because it's a mirage. The only moment that ever comes is this one, and if you're not present for it, you've missed your life. Here's the practice that will transform 2026 for you. Mindful monotasking. You're going to do one thing at a time with your full attention. When you eat, just eat. When you walk, just walk. When you talk to someone, just talk to them. When you work, just work. No multitasking, no mental time travel, full presence. This sounds simple, and that's precisely why it's revolutionary. Simple doesn't mean easy, and this practice will show you just how scattered you've been. The Buddhist practice of mindfulness isn't about emptying your mind or achieving some blissed-out state. It's about being fully present with whatever is happening right now, without judgment. The dishes aren't boring. Your judgment that they're boring is what makes them boring. The commute isn't wasted time. Your belief that it's wasted makes it feel wasted. The present moment isn't lacking anything. Your comparison to imagined futures makes it seem insufficient. What happens when you practice radical presence? First, anxiety decreases dramatically. Because anxiety lives in the future. It's worry about what might happen. But when you're fully here, fully now, there's nothing to be anxious about. This moment, right now, is almost always okay. Even when it's challenging, it's manageable. The suffering comes from adding all the future moments to this one, carrying tomorrow's problems on today's back. Second, your performance improves in every area, because presence equals excellence. You can't do your best work while mentally elsewhere. You can't build deep relationships while emotionally absent. You can't find creative solutions while distracted. Every master of any craft will tell you the same thing. Presence is the secret. The musician present with the music, the athlete present with the game, the artist present with the canvas. Presence is where genius lives. Third, you start noticing beauty you've been missing. The way light hits the wall, the warmth of your coffee cup, the sound of rain, the smile of a stranger, the comfort of your bed. Thousands of small miracles happening every day that you've been too busy projecting into the future to notice. Life isn't waiting to get good. It's good now. You're just not present enough to see it. Here's your specific practice for presence. Set reminders throughout your day that simply say, now. When they go off, stop whatever you're doing and take 3 conscious breaths. Feel your body. Notice your surroundings. Come back to this moment. Don't make it complicated. Just return, again and again. Because presence isn't a destination you reach, It's a practice you commit to. You're also going to practice anchoring statements. Throughout your day, you'll say to yourself, right now, I am breathing. Right now, I am safe. Right now, I am here. These statements aren't denying future challenges. They're acknowledging present reality. They're pulling you out of the mental time machine and planting you firmly in the only moment where you have any actual power. The ancient monks knew something your modern mind has forgotten. This moment is enough. Not because it contains everything you want, but because it contains everything that's real. The rest is story. The rest is imagination. This breath, this heartbeat, this exact second, this is your life. Not the highlight reel, not the future version. This. And when you're finally present for it, you discover it was never lacking. You were just looking past it. Show me you're committing to presence over projection. Type this. I am here now. You've just received 7 keys that ancient philosophers used to unlock peace in the middle of chaos, power in the face of uncertainty, and purpose despite obstacles. But here's what separates people who transform from people who just consume information: application. You can know all 7 principles perfectly and still live in worry if you don't practice them daily. 2026 is going to work out for you, not because the universe suddenly removes all challenges, but because you've changed your relationship with challenges, because you've learned to distinguish concern from worry, because you've made peace with uncertainty, because you've stopped rehearsing disasters, because you trust timing, because you've released the need for validation, because you transform obstacles, because you practice presence. The ancient philosophers weren't special. They were simply willing to practice these principles until they became reflexes. They trained their minds the way athletes train their bodies, with consistency, with discipline, with commitment. And that's your invitation for this year. Not to be perfect, but to be practicing. Not to never worry, but to catch yourself worrying and choose differently. Everything you've been worried about, everything that's been keeping you up at night, everything that's been making you feel like you're falling behind, it all shifts when you shift. The circumstances don't have to change for your experience to transform. That's the radical promise of ancient philosophy. That's the gift available to you right now. So, here's what you're going to do. You're going to hit that like button to seal this commitment. You're going to leave a comment with the affirmation that resonated most. You're going to share this message with someone who needs to hear it. And you're going to subscribe to this channel because transformation isn't a single video, it's a continuous practice. And I'm here to walk this path with you. Watch how everything starts working out in 2026 when you stop worrying. Not because problems disappear, but because you've finally become someone who doesn't need them to, someone who can handle uncertainty, someone who can transform obstacles, someone who can be at peace even in the storm. That person isn't someone you need to become. That person is who you already are underneath all the worry. This year, you're just finally going to remember. If this message resonated with your soul, seal it with this affirmation in the comments. I am at peace.